Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 305 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Andy. Now, I do have to admit to you all that the idea of interviewing an Andy was difficult for me at first, but I am so glad that I did because I just learned so much from Andy today. I really appreciated all the different types of analogies that he had and comparisons to life because he is a visual guy and I definitely am too. So a lot of those visuals really helped me. I am also really excited to read his book. So you will hear about his book. The book is called Overcoming Life's Toughest Setbacks. And I know you can get it on Amazon, but he says it might even be easier to get it on his website. The website is askandycampbell.com. Remember, if you'd like to share your story on the podcast, email me at Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, @andysmom.com. Today's podcast is being sponsored by Michelle in honor of her son, Nathan. Michelle was a guest a long time ago on the podcast, way back on episode 11. Nathan died when he was only a few hours old, but he would be celebrating his 30th birthday this month. So Michelle thought it would be a great opportunity to sponsor an episode in his name. So thank you so much, Michelle, for your $125 donation. Right now, though, I just want you to sit back and enjoy listening to Andy, Heston's dad. Thank you so much, Andy, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Marcy. It's great to be here.
I have to say that it was just kind of weird for me to even say that, to welcome an Andy to the show. And as if you look in my background, you can see that we are in Andy's room. So you see Andy kind of everywhere. This is all Andy. So
yeah,
this is interesting, but you are Heston's dad. So we are here to talk about Heston and to talk about your grief journey since losing Heston. So do you want to start out just by telling us all about your son, Heston?
Yeah, Heston, and if you don't mind, I'll speak about him in the present tense.
Yeah.
Because it's it is the way I think of him. Heston is transparently, he was probably too soft a soul for this world.
Uh-huh.
He was a really good human being, probably a little too focused on justice and things that were, everything was black and white to him, what was right or what was wrong.
Yeah.
And when you mix that with a very soft spirit, this can be a very difficult world to exist in.
Mm-hmm.
We do recognize some mental challenges, some mental, illness, depression was, rampant. But he was highly intelligent, which again, I think in some ways, I remember our general physician who knew him well and had just met with him 2 weeks before Heston took his life. He told me after that, he said, it's the intelligent ones I always worry about.
Yeah.
Because they think too much. They think deeply about things.
Yeah.
But he was highly intelligent. He loved languages. Before he passed away in about, I think it was 18 months, he learned to read, write, and was fluent in Latin. He's not Catholic. He's never been to Italy, but he just, he loved history and the Roman Empire, and he loved what he considered to be the beauty of the Latin language.
Wow.
Picked it up over about 18 months. He didn't go into the service, but he had thought about going into the service, and so when he tested on the ASVAB, his grandfather, actually it's interesting, his grandfather was this very large, 6'4", 235-pound, uneducated farm boy from South Alabama who had lived a very difficult life and in the early 60s wanted to get out of that. So he joined the Army, who tested him and said, "You have a propensity to speak Vietnamese." And he didn't know what, he was like, "I don't know what that is." And they were like, "Well, it's a place where we're fighting a war right now. So you're going to learn Vietnamese and then you're going to Vietnam."
Wow.
And it was interesting when Heston tested on the ASVAB, they told him, they said, "You can have your pick. You've scored off the charts on 3 languages, all 3 we need. You can pick Arabic, you can pick Mandarin, and you can pick Vietnamese.
Oh, wow.
We'll send you to school for all." So I thought it was really interesting that his grandfather learned Vietnamese in 6 months. And then they told Heston that his, I think it may have been his top score or his second best score out of the 3 was in Vietnamese, which he had never had any exposure to at all. So he was just, Heston remains just a very soft spirit, but someone who was intelligent to the point where things were very black and white to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he thought he could see the future, which he couldn't.
Right.
He told us when he was 9 years old that he did not think he wanted to live anymore.
Really?
He died when he was 18. Yeah, he was 9. He was not connected to the internet. He didn't know anyone who had ever taken their own life. He didn't know anyone who knew someone who had taken their own life, right? But he decided, and as we talked about it, we had many, many philosophical conversations over the next 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what it really boiled down to was, in his view of the world, life was very simple. You were born, you had a lot of struggles and pain, and then you died. So why don't we just skip that middle part?
Wow.
But it wasn't like an emotional thing to him. It was a very logical, reasoned thing. He loved philosophy. He read all the great literary works, all the classics. And then he mixed in, which was probably, if you're in the right place mentally, one can read Nietzsche deeply and have philosophical debates and arguments. If you're not in a good mental place, Nietzsche can reinforce that, the kind of the hopelessness of life,
Mm-hmm.
the futility of life. It can reinforce that, even to the point he read the Bible cover to cover multiple times, all the way through. Like, he just loved reading literary works. And but he also read Marcus Aurelius's diaries. And as someone reminded me one time, those were diaries. Marcus Aurelius never really intended for somebody to read his private, personal correspondence to himself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in not a good mental place, a Stoic philosophy mixed with a Nietzsche view of the world, and for someone who struggles with depression, those things can kind of wrap into a very hollow existence, a very negative view of the point of life. And so it loses meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche is kind of the opposite. To me, Nietzsche is kind of the opposite of Viktor Frankl, if you've ever read Man's Search for Meaning. I highly recommend it.
I have not, yeah.
I highly recommend it. It was recommended to me after Heston's passing. It really changed a lot of my view of just life in general. Frankl was a psychiatrist in Austria who ended up going to the camps. He lost his wife. He lost his unborn child. He lost all of his family. But it's a book about his observations of people who went through the camps and who survived and who didn't, and why some survived and why some didn't. Ultimately, when you get through the first half of it and you get in, like, that's the description of the camps, and then you get into the second half of the book where he talks about the need for man's search for meaning,
Mm-hmm.
which I was struggling with, my wife was struggling with, my 3 remaining children struggling with meaning in life when you experience the suicide of a child, right? Like, it can find a lot of cracks, weak spots in your mental state when that kind of experience happens. But Nietzsche is kind of the opposite of that, where Frankl took the view that when you're in despair, you must hang on to meaning. You must have meaning, and inscribes how to acquire meaning in your life.
Yeah.
Even in the worst of circumstances, how to hang on to meaning. And if you don't have it, how to acquire it. Nietzsche was kind of the opposite of that. He's like, there is no meaning, there is no purpose. Why don't we just call it a day? And so eventually one day, after we thought Heston had made a lot of progress, he had what, looking back on it now, was obviously a mental setback. And one day he decided that the time had come. Having adopted Stoicism as one of his base philosophies, he was determined not to be afraid of death. And so He took probably one of the only irreversible actions humans can take.
Right.
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 I used to tell him that all the time. It's like, you can do a lot of things, Heston, but never make an irreversible decision.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the story of the Garden of Eden. It's like there's all these things you can have, but don't eat from that tree. Everything else is yours.
Right.
And I used to say that's the way decisions are, man. You can take all these other actions are yours to choose from. Do not make the one irreversible decision.
Mm-hmm.
But he did. And so now we live with the consequences of that decision.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you were talking about with purpose and comparing those two, your two writers that are talking about that, because I feel like when I talk to bereaved parents, you do feel like they will fall into those camps a little bit. And sometimes there is no more purpose. My purpose is gone. My purpose was to parent my children. My purpose was this, and now it's gone. And there is no more purpose. And then, of course, there's the other of let's try to find some purpose in meaning in all of this pain. And that's where I certainly fall now, but it takes some time to get there. I don't think it's just automatic that you just click to, go very quickly over to, okay, this horrible thing happened, but let's find some good, let's find some purpose in this. So I do really, really appreciate that.
We struggled through that.
Yeah.
My wife took the opposite approach. We almost lost her.
Yeah.
Suicide after Heston, because he was the youngest, is the youngest.
Yeah.
And they had spent, as the youngest child and mother sometimes do, they had spent a little more time together.
Mm-hmm.
We had a very transparent, open discussion and relationship with Heston, because at that point, when he tells you that at 9, not a lot, there's no reason to try to, to not. The only way to get through those things is to have very open discussions about the possibilities and what's going on and where we're really at and who really feels the way they feel. And you do all the things that you can do that you think is having a positive impact.
Right.
So he had promised his mother multiple times that he would never follow through in taking his own life until he had spoken with her to give her a chance to talk him out of it.
Right.
And he didn't. And so I think there was even almost more so than the act of him taking his life was him violating the trust that they had built through these very open discussions, that she would understand where he was, that he would never follow through without them having the opportunity to discuss. And looking back on it, it's probably unrealistic for that, because I think when a person is in that state of despair and that state of darkness, I don't think there's, they're not worried about the other person. They're not worried about other people. It's just not in a malicious way, but I think it's just, at least for Heston, I think it was just wanting the pain to end, wanting the despair to end.
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact he did not realize that the despair and the pain didn't actually leave. He left, but the despair and the pain stayed with us.
Right.
And then infected us, and even more so than it had, and then infected everyone who knew him, and even over time, many people who never knew him. That pain and despair has kind of spread out. But yeah, we struggled with that. I have been through enough things in my life that I still love to breathe. I love to see the sun, feel the sun, and so I took the approach more of Frankl, and that was one of the things that really helped me when I read Frankl. It was like, there's somebody else here that, this is what I've been working to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? That find meaning. And my wife was just in a terrible state of despair. My children were in a terrible state of despair. But we have survived these 4 years, and we're able now to have some happiness and some joy in spite of it. But yeah, I think, and when I say the person, I'm just speaking from my own experience with Heston, so I don't mean to imply broadly or like have a blanket statement, but I think the person that takes their life in that moment believes that things will be better.
Yeah.
And, for those left behind, things are not better, they're worse.
Right.
And I do think it comes down to the one thing that we can do is decide that their actions will not take us with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think from there it becomes a choice, a decision. One of the things that I've heard people talk about it, and I think it's true. It's always just to define what getting stuck is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think one way to look at it is either we can stay in the moment where he took that action. And then I think people think, well, if I don't stay in that moment, if I don't stay there with the person,
Mm-hmm.
then I will be abandoning them. I will leave them. I will forget them. They will somehow not have existed. But I worked to convince our family that the way to do it was to move forward and bring him with us,
Yes.
not to stay in that moment with him.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow that makes sense to me in not being stuck.
Yeah.
If somebody's going to get stuck, he can get stuck with us while we move forward instead of us getting stuck with him in that last moment of despair.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I feel like, even when I go way back to early in my time in therapy, I did feel like it was almost betraying Andy a little bit if I didn't hang on to all the sadness all the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do know I've talked to Gwen is a regular contributor to the podcast and is on all the time. And she talked some time ago about someone online that would go on Facebook, and she said something about how she got up every morning, she stayed in her dark bedroom, sat in her chair, and like basically just sat in a chair in a dark room with a cup of coffee all day, every day, never did anything because she didn't want. And that is really the definition of being stuck and feeling like you want to stay there. You want to be in that miserableness. But as you say, moving forward is important. Recently, we just went on a big family vacation. That's why it took me 2 months to interview you from when we first talked. Yeah. But when we were on that big family vacation, I've mentioned this on the recent podcast, that we took Andy's teddy bear. Andy's favorite teddy bear, Herky, went on the trip. It's probably around here somewhere if I look around. And Herky went everywhere. Herky went to St. Peter's Square. Herky went to the Acropolis. Herky went to everywhere we went, that bear went. And it just felt like that was a tangible way for me to bring him along.
Yeah.
And we had an amazing trip, a wonderful time. And I got to feel like he was kind of there with us, even though he wasn't really, but it was a way, just a really tangible way to do it. And I really liked doing it that way. We took pictures all the time, and we had we had the pictures with the bear, the whole family picture with the bear in it. And it was just important to me to do that. And I think that kind of goes into a little bit of what you're saying about moving forward in life, but moving forward with him. Like I feel like Andy does this podcast with me. I feel like it's something we kind of can do together, right? It gives me some purpose, and it gives me a way to think about him and honor him,
I don't think we can be certain that he wasn't right there the entire time, right?
Right. I don't think we can either. Right.
So I'll tell you a story about something in a minute. That's kind of, I laugh at it now. In the moment, it wasn't funny, but I agree with you. We saw what was described, the lady who goes and sits.
Yeah.
We saw that, because, in the beginning, you go to a suicide group, or you get involved in a group on Facebook of parents who have lost children to suicide. And I had to get out of that. My wife stayed in it for a little while longer, but I was like, I can't, because there was too many people coming in, too many people. Like all the time, every day, people getting added to this group. And I was like, I can't, that's just too much for me to comprehend the number of parents that are having to, or that are joining these groups. And the group, and it was a general group. There were parents there that had lost children. There were, spouses that had lost husbands. There was, wives who lost husbands lost wives, different children, siblings who had lost siblings, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I remember there was this one, we went to this home, because they had like a little group get together, and it's a local group. Mm-hmm. And this lady had kept her house exactly as it was, like the garage where her husband actually took his life, in the driveway of the home where they lived, in front of his garage where he did woodworking and all this stuff. It hasn't been touched in like 8 years. And she goes there. I think she goes there to experience some good times, to remember, and she wants to be in that moment, you know? And what I think I observed then was, I don't think that person was giving, and I would never judge, like not judging at all. Okay.
Right.
That's
right.
like this is an individualized journey, but I think she wasn't giving herself a chance to take him with her.
Yeah.
So she went back to that place to be with him. And visually to me, that was like, wow, I don't know what that is, but I want to avoid that. Right. And then I saw this visual. I don't know where I saw it now, but I saw, and it was just talking about loss of a loved one in general terms, not about this topic, right? But loss of a loved one. And it had a frame, and in the frame was just blackness, like it was the hole in your heart from this loss.
Yeah.
And it was 100% of the picture. And then it had a picture beside it. The frame was larger. The size of the hole in that, you know, this darkness that represented the hole in the heart in the second picture was the exact same size, because time does not heal all wounds.
Yes.
That's untrue, right? That's untrue. It's a nice cliche and people say it to you, but it doesn't help because it's not true. I prefer cliches that are true, but that one's not.
Yeah.
But as a percentage of the whole picture, the frame had expanded.
Yeah.
And as a percentage of the whole picture, now it wasn't 100%, it was 5%. But the whole was the same size.
Yeah.
And that made sense to me, right? It was like, okay, this loss is probably never going to get smaller.
Right.
But one of the things, at the point of the message it was giving was, what you can do is make your picture bigger.
Yeah. Just grow and expand yourself. Yeah.
So that it becomes not 100%, and then it can be 5 or 10%. And it also kind of, because I think in pictures, I don't like it when you speak, I hear words, but then I see pictures. Like I don't like just like,
Yeah.
You'll notice sometimes I look up into the room. It can be kind of annoying, but I'm seeing a picture when you're talking, right? Like it's formulaic.
I love that image, by the way. I love
But
it.
it made sense to me. You know, it's like, oh, so I'm going to take them with them through this experience. That is not going to diminish, because that kind of feels like, you know, like a betrayal in a certain way. Like, is it going to diminish? Like I'm going to take this 100% pain and it's going to go to 5%. And this picture was like, no, it's going to remain 100% of the pain. It's just the pain will become 5% of your life.
Right.
You know, and I was like, okay, so the goal is continue to experience life, give yourself, the universe, a chance to build around it, and then you won't forget. Because we don't forget.
No.
There's no forgetting. I think it's an illusion and a fear. It takes up so much space, especially early on, that you just don't want to leave them.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to forget them, and you don't realize, one doesn't realize until later that that's impossible.
But it is a very big fear at the beginning.
It stopped, and I think it's the fear that stops us from expanding the picture frame. And because we just don't want to. It's like it's a betrayal if it's not 100% of our lives. And yeah, that picture helped me kind of make that transition. And I told my wife and my children, I think it helped them kind of look at it, especially my wife, because it's like, well, that hole in our hearts is never going to get smaller.
Yeah.
That will remain. So we need to make our hearts bigger. Like, so it's just a smaller percentage, which doesn't diminish his existence. It just doesn't keep us from existing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a beautiful image, though. I love that.
After our son's passing, we ended up getting, my wife was, you know, really struggling. And we have, at that time we had 2 dogs. And so she decided she wanted another of one of the dogs. She wanted another. And the lady that we'd gotten this dog, the one of the 2 dogs from, the other one was very old. He would end up passing away in a year or so. But this one was, I think, 2 at the time, and maybe 3. And so the lady we got him from had another litter, and it would be his half brother. And so my wife saw a picture of one, and she's like, I want that dog. That's going to be my healing animal. Like, I want that dog.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so went and got the dog, brought him back. He was everything that he was supposed to be. He still is. I mean, he just, I call him Heston, actually. Tell you why later, but I talk to him all the time like he's Heston. We moved into this new home, and I was cutting the grass one day, and we had, we have a fenced-in backyard for the dogs. And I had made the error coming from the front yard to the back door of leaving the gate open. And at this point, he was probably about 7 or 8 months old, 6, 8 months old. And he's fast. I didn't even know he was gone. He was gone. And so we were supposed to leave. We had decided to go take some time away. So this had only been about, I don't know, like a year after Heston's passing. And so it was like, we were finally, working to make that step to go do something and, kind of force ourselves to find some bit of enjoyment. But now, the day before we're supposed to leave, the dog is gone. A lot of emotional attachment to that dog. And my wife was just devastated. We started getting reports. People on Facebook would call in. People were trying to help us find him in the neighborhood. And we have a main road way out at the end of the neighborhood. There's a main road, and the speed limit is 45, so everybody drives 55. So if he ever got to the road, it's like, man, he won't make it. And we live in a very wooded area, so if he gets in the woods, he's too young, he's never been trained, he'll get lost, and we'll never find him. And then we started getting reports that he had actually crossed the road. Like, people had slammed on brakes and missed him, but he had gotten across the road, and then so I had taken, at the time I had a Jeep that the dogs rode in. They loved to ride in it. So I took the Jeep and I tried to find him. Couldn't find him. And this is going on now for like 2 or 3 hours. My wife's just devastated at home. She's like, she's just convinced the dog is gone. I'm thinking we just got her out of a deep depression or a dark spot with Heston. And now this thing has occurred. And so I'm out in the woods and I'm sitting in my Jeep, and I have a conversation with Heston. And I was like, listen, you need to bring your ass back down here, and you need to straighten this out. You caused this problem. I wouldn't even have this dog if you were here, okay? Now I've got the dog to help your mother deal with you not being here. So you need to get involved. This is on you. I'm just sitting in the Jeep talking to myself out loud, and I was like,
right.
You need to come find this dog.
And you're mad. Yeah, right.
I am pissed at this point. Like, I am upset. Okay. Like,
right.
And Heston and I are finally going to have that conversation. Okay.
Right.
We're going to have this one where, you remember all the times I told you don't do the irreversible thing? Well, you know what? You own this problem. Okay. And so I am just beside, I'm like, look. And so he and I have, at least I believe he and I had a very transparent conversation about his responsibilities in solving what he has created.
Right.
And so I'm driving back home. My wife calls me and says, somebody just saw him. She tells me where. It's just a little bit down the road. So I go flying down the road. I look around. I can't find him. Then I get another call from somebody that says, I just saw him at this spot. And sure enough, took the Jeep around, pulled up near a bridge over like a big retention pond. And I parked. I called his name, and I looked down, and he was standing in the edge of the retention pond in the water. It was about 96 degrees that day. He was completely exhausted. And I opened the back of the Jeep, the back door, and he came like he always does with what little energy he had left, and he jumped up in the Jeep, and I took him home. And my wife could not believe I had found him. And I said, well, I didn't.
Yeah.
Heston and I had a chat. Heston found him, and she's like, I haven't forgiven him yet. I'm just saying he's trying to make it up. Okay. He got the dog. We can go on our trip now. So he's doing his best right now to try to make it up to us. But I'm just telling you, it wasn't me that actually found the dog. Heston did it. So, we deal with these things as best we can.
That's a great story. I love that.
Yeah, it was my opportunity to have a very transparent conversation with him.
No, I think that was good and healthy for you too. It was a beautiful thing overall.
I told him, I said, listen, I don't hold this against you. Okay. We had a lot of conversations. It was a bad decision. I'm pretty sure you realize now it was a bad decision. But if you think that's getting you off the hook for today, it's not. Okay. Like, I'm having this whole coming out loud, luckily just in the woods by myself, sitting in a Jeep. We had a direct conversation, and, he showed up. So that's what was important,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't prove he did. I can't prove he didn't. So I just go with,
You
he
know,
tried to make up a little bit for it that day,
I love it. I think that's great. I think that's amazing. So we haven't talked about this yet, but you have also written a book. So I don't want to start by talking about that, but I want to start by talking about what kind of led you to the idea of you wanting to write a book and all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so I had started ages ago. Like I said, I kind of see words in pictures and colors, and to remember things that I think I observe in life. So, I mean, I've had some, I guess what people would call some difficult situations. I dealt with sexual abuse when I was a child, lost my mother to cancer at at an early age, watched her die over 11 years from cancer. I was probably from low self-esteem from the sexual exploitation. I was bullied a lot, I was pretty small for a child. Somehow I grew when I was like 21 years old. I started putting on size and height and weight and all this stuff. I don't know what happened before that. And then I ended up, when I was 53, I ended up getting diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So I'm coming up on 7 years now. So that's a big win. But it was during my treatments, about 2 years into my treatments for pancreatic cancer, that Heston took his life. And all of those things, the suicide was enough, but I think all of those things, the weight of the suicide it's like, the pain is like water. It will always find a way, right? It will always find like the cracks, the crevices, the smallest little weaknesses. At least my experience is the smallest weaknesses in your personality, in your existence, right? Like, it's just the pressure of it is intense. And so as my wife and I and children went through kind of grief counseling afterwards, we ended up going through EMDR. And that was tremendously helpful. And my physician, through my family physician, and he had kind of guided my cancer treatment, I kept saying, hey, you need to write a book because you're still alive. Like, not a lot of people still alive this years after getting diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And, you've lost Heston, you're still not, you're not dead. So, you should write a book. But I didn't want to write a book about, first of all, I'm not a writer. I'm not a very good writer. And like I said, if I was an artist, I'd be a much better painter than writer, but I'm neither an artist nor a writer. But I had collected these things along the way. Like, I've got 3 tattoos on each arm, 3 words on each arm, and they represent, I don't know where, somewhere when I was a teenager, maybe early 20s, I was thinking about, how did my ancestors survive? How did they survive? Like, they had nothing, they lived in cabins, they didn't have air conditioning, they didn't have indoor plumbing, they had no toilet paper, women didn't have sanitary products, nobody had this, nobody had no air conditioning, but somehow they survived. Like, how did they survive? And I'm struggling with all this stuff, how did they survive? And so I came up with 6 words that I thought represented how they had survived. And those words were honor, courage, determination, perseverance, wisdom, and success. And in my mind, the way the picture came together was that if you start with an honorable intention, if you start by taking honorable actions, that would give you courage. And if you would show small amounts of courage over and over again, that's what people refer to as determination. They'll be like, that, she's very determined. And I think in my mind, that's because she's shown courage over and over again. And then courage turns into determination. Determination turns into perseverance. If you remained determined, then people say, oh, you persevere. If you persevere long enough to have enough experiences, my grandfather used to say, experience is what you get just after you needed it. And so you have, and that's what turns into wisdom, and wisdom is the foundation of success. And so I'd just kind of gotten in this habit of turning things into kind of phrases that represented a bigger picture to me. And I could see the word, and that would represent a picture. And so I started collecting up these, what eventually became what I refer to as my 15 core beliefs. And there were things that I observed over time that had helped me, or I'd kind of observed it broadly, and what worked out well and what didn't work out well. I would write down these phrases, kind of meta phrases that would remind me of this bigger picture of something to do. Like, no one outruns the universe. So don't be so arrogant to think that you're so smart that you can outrun the universe. Like you can do something against principles that are just designed into the universe. Like don't do that. That's a bad thing. Nobody ever, for a short period of time, it has the illusion that you're getting away with something, that you're smarter than the universe. Like you found the one thing that's never been experienced before. You found the one way to do something nobody ever thought of. And it's like,
Right.
It's like the book of Ecclesiastes is like, there's nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not. You're probably not that smart. So I've write down these little phrases just to remind me, because there have been times when I've been arrogant and conceited and I thought I knew something. And that would remind me. It's like, well, when you start thinking that way, just remember nobody outruns the universe. And so I started collecting up these core beliefs. And so as I went through EMDR and I was able to deal with a lot of these things that I had experienced in life, starting with the loss of Heston and back through the 3 pages that the therapist took notes on. It's never good when you're with her and she keeps turning the page.
Yeah.
She's writing and it's a legal page, It's like a long legal page. And then she turns it again and keeps writing. It's like, we can stop now. But as I worked through that, and just to kind of say, I think this is an interesting thing that I realized afterwards. So the company I work for, starting about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, we went through about 18 months of regular layoffs.
Oh, okay.
And I have a relatively small team that reported to me, but I lost about 50% of those people, okay, over that period of time. And I gotten very frustrated. And I really like the company I work for. It's been wonderful to me through a number of different things. The cancer, multiple back surgeries, the loss of Heston. I mean, it's been just a wonderful place to be. I have a lot of loyalty to this company. But I had become very disenchanted going through these layoffs.
Yeah.
And I realized that part of it was, one day I realized I had just had the thought that the company was committing suicide and I didn't want to lose another thing that I loved.
Yeah.
And I was like, the hell are you talking about? It's a company. Like, it's not committing suicide. Like it's not taking its own life. It's not. How are you equating these two things? But just to kind of, as an example of how it starts to permeate underneath, like your thinking, or at least my thinking, it just is permeating in ways and causing me to think in ways that I'm like, that's not, what are you talking about? They're not related. They're not the same thing. But it started to weigh on me, so I took a leave of absence. And I was like, well, either I'm going to get so frustrated because I've got to work this out. So I went back to a different therapist and did another, like some more EMDR, some hypnotherapy, some things, because I was like, I got to get rid of whatever is causing this. I've got to separate. I got to find a way to get through this. And it was during that time frame, at some point I got bored. And so I was like, well, you can't really write that well, but just start and see what happens. And so what I decided to do was not write a book about any of the experiences, but to write a book about the core beliefs and how they applied to these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the book kind of became, was a way to kind of get some things out, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
That's how I came to writing those down. And then the book was just kind of I don't want to say it was by accident, but it certainly wasn't with, like, I didn't intend to end up with it where I ended up with it. I just kind of went with it.
Well, that's kind of the more beautiful way, I think. When you didn't have specific expectations, you didn't have specific things you were planning to do, when it happens sort of organically, that means that's how it was meant to be in some ways, right?
Yeah. And that's, at some point I just looked at it and we kind of chatted about this. I just looked at it like, well, you're not, I thought back to the story of Moses. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in my way, paraphrasing it, Moses, like, you want me to what?
Yeah. Right.
And it's like, oh, I want you to go do this thing. And he's like, bro, I'm not a speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I got to stutter. All right. Like, I don't know if, like, it's God and everything. I don't know if you've noticed, but that's not me. And he's like, don't worry, I'm going to send somebody with you. They'll take care of it. And that's kind of just I kind of relied on that with the book and was like, well, it doesn't really matter how good or how poor of an author you are. If it's meant to be, the creator will just work it out,
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, well, we'll just throw it out there and see what happens. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
That's the kind of, like, these podcasts you and I were talking. It's like, I don't even know where they go. It's just kind of like, well, I don't know. I just kind of have to rely on the faith something will be said to someone, even if it's just one person, that they'll be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You kind of, I think, shortchange yourself a little bit with, I know I haven't read your writing. I haven't read the book, but I feel like even when talking to you, the imagery that you give is really, really good. I love the examples that you give and tying that in. I mean, those are just some beautiful images that I have. And I think the way you think, I don't know, it just maybe does resonate with me quite a lot, but I would enjoy reading someone that can give those types of analogies, because I think those are beautiful to think about in that way, you know? So
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I will tell you that. So I got a quote. Sorry if somebody was like, you got to get an editor.
yeah, right.
Okay, like you can't, because I didn't know what I was doing. Like I just read stuff, but I had what I thought was a manuscript, and I was like, it's not awful.
Yeah.
It's not that bad. Like I think I'm at a point. And they were like, well, you got to give it to an editor. So I hired an editor. She gave me a quote. She had a lot of great reviews from people, and it's like, she's good at what she does, and this book's right up her alley. I was like, okay. So she gives me a quote, send her the manuscript. She looks at it, and she's like, I'm gonna have to adjust my quote. I was like, really? And she's like, we got some work to do. I mean, it actually was very helpful because it helped me, I think, better kind of conversations are much easier for me than writing.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
She was able to help me. So I would talk to her, and then she's like, oh, well, this is what you wanted to say. And so I hope it represents that.
Oh, good. Okay. That's beautiful.
I hope it represents kind of the same imagery or something like that, because she had, but that's one of those things I had to learn, that sometimes you need someone to help you kind of make a transition into a different way of communicating.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I think anybody who creates something, you look back on it and you're like, oh, I would have done that different. I would have done this different. I would have used different words. I would have done those things. Just kind of maybe as a self-critical
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
way of thinking. But I just go back to, it is what it is.
And it's what it's supposed to be.
And the creator will just have to work it out. Like if he could help Moses, he could just kind of help me deal with it, so like, I'm no Moses, but he's got to still have a couple tricks in there that he can help me out,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So how long was the process of writing the book then?
It was less than 90 days. It was probably the longest part of it was, working with the editor, and then you have to get somebody. I mean, I just hired contractors. It's like a self-published thing, so I just hired contractors, but you got to get somebody who creates book covers, and you got to get somebody who, you got to have the manuscript finished, and the editor's got to be done with it. So then you got to hand it to somebody who formats it, and then you got to go through all this, and then so I think it took, I would say 8 weeks, but it was probably more like 12, start to finish.
Okay. Well, that is really quick. I mean, I've talked to other people that's several year process. I mean, it was not too long ago. There was somebody that was 7 years beginning to end. So, yeah. I mean, obviously that wasn't you, because Heston died 4 years ago, but.
If I took all the time, because the book is about the core beliefs.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And so if I went back to when I started collecting them and writing them down.
That's true.
It probably was a couple of decades or more.
Right.
But from the time, it's like, well, it's kind of like, I've seen these documentaries of, people who write history, biographies and stuff, and they'll just have all these pages and notes and, reference materials and all this stuff that they collected over 15 years. And then they sit down and it takes them 3 or 4 months to write the book. But they spent 15 years collecting all the stuff. So
that's true. That's probably like you.
Yeah. From the time I sat down and said, okay, I'm just going to try to type something out, I think it was 12 weeks. But, it's really kind of a life experience thing.
Yeah.
So I guess it took a lifetime.
Did that process help you in your grief at all? Or do you feel like you needed to be at a certain point in your grief in order to do it? Or maybe a combination?
I think probably a combination.
Mm-hmm.
But it helped me to think that it might help someone else.
Yeah.
Right. That was certainly helpful. And to go through the process, there wasn't a way that I could really not think about each one of those beliefs and in some way have it shape the experience of losing Heston, the life of Heston, and then Heston's passing. I think doing podcasts actually is a way, has helped me tremendously.
Yeah.
One, you talk to people who've had similar experiences, but most of the conversation is about how to move forward from the experiences. It's not really talking about how you stay in the experience,
mm-hmm.
but how you move forward in spite of it. So that's been super helpful. So I think the book has been really helpful to me, maybe more so than anybody who's read it. It's been helpful to me in that it was something to do that then led to other things.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole process has been helpful. Yeah, it has been.
Yeah. Well, and I think now you're episode number 305. So obviously I've done this a long time now. And I do feel like I started really to try to bring hope and healing to other people. I really felt like it was something that God kind of called me to do, that I really probably kind of started a little bit kicking and screaming. I didn't really feel like I was equipped to do it. I didn't seem like I certainly would have never guessed in a million years that I would have done this, because similar to you with writing a book, I don't feel like I'm certainly not a technical kind of person. So all the technology stuff was a lot. And then I don't like being with a lot of people in a crowded space. I'm very introverted. It doesn't seem like it would fit with me, but yet it has brought me so much healing. Even though the goal was to try to help other people, the goal was to share stories of other people and other kids, and let parents just share the stories of their kids and the stories of their journeys and help us kind of walk through together. And I feel like the amount of healing it's done to me is amazing. I mean, it's just tremendous.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I really expected, when I first started it.
I think though, and maybe it's this idea has just come to me listening to you describe it, which, by the way, you're good at the podcast. Look, the conversation is easy to have. So I think doing something is an active way, even though it has some focus on the loss, it is an active way to move forward and take them with us. I don't know, I just had this thought listening to you. It's like, 305 episodes. You haven't really stayed in that moment. You've just kind of taken him with you through a journey.
Yeah.
And you've continued on, and now you've had all these additional experiences that kind of contribute to the bigger picture frame, and it's kind of filling up this expanding picture frame. And so,
right. It just goes right back to what you had said earlier about that picture frame, about things getting bigger and bigger. And you were right. I mean, the loss is the same. The whole is the same. My heart, my being, your heart, your being have gotten a lot bigger.
Yeah. And that's the only, I think, like I said, that picture just meant so much to me, because it was a way, maybe the only way, but it was certainly a way to not be stuck in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I could take the moment with me, but I wouldn't be stuck in that moment. I could have some other moments. Yeah. And I think, look, I mean, the cliche, all time heals all wounds. It's like everything else that people try to say with the best of intentions.
Yeah.
That are either useless or actually make things worse. When they're trying to help.
Yeah.
And they might even be right, but there are some cliches I would just say and I'm sure you listeners, everybody has had this experience where it's like, that's not helpful. Yeah. No. I know you're trying to be helpful right now, but that's actually not helpful. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of, my experience, Marcy, is we have to put a lot of effort we have to work to move forward. Mm-hmm. And if we go back to that whole honor, courage, determination thing, it is honorable to continue our lives.
Yeah.
That is an honorable thing to do. We still have much to give. My loss of Heston's physical presence did not remove from me the responsibility to fulfill my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It did not take that off my shoulders. So I think, I would tell people, like the lady who's sitting there with a cup of coffee in the dark room, getting up this morning that was a small piece of courage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Deciding that you're going to eat today.
Yeah.
That's a small piece of courage. And just deciding one day that, it's like, I think it's about time I take a shower, especially right afterward. I think it's important for people to realize that those are exhibitions of courage, and over again, it demonstrates to your own subconscious, to your own spirit, that you are determined and that you can persevere. And And people will look for these big things, you know. You may not even remember this. I've read about the guy, you know, but it's like Audie Murphy from like World War II. And, you know, he's this soldier who ends up, like everybody around him had gotten killed, and he had like this, you know, Gatling gun and some machine guns. He ends up killing like 200 Germans and taking out like a sniper's nest or something. Like, it's a huge story. They pull him out of the army. They send him around during World War II everywhere. It's like a hero to like sell war bonds and all this stuff. And sometimes I think people think of like big heroic acts.
Yeah.
You know, like somebody who lifts a car off of somebody who's, you know, had a crash, or they drag somebody out of a burning building. And so they're like, well, I just haven't been courageous today. Well, the fact is you have been courageous today.
Yeah.
You know, you got out of bed this morning.
Yeah.
And you didn't let this loss break you today.
Yeah.
That's courage. And so you string together a few events like that, getting up, taking a shower. People will be like, what's the, you know what, when you're in that spot, getting up, taking a shower is a courageous act. Like, it takes a lot to get up out of the bed. And so for her, she's exhibited courage. It would be helpful if she could exhibit a little more courage. So, you know, just one more example of courage to not go to that room one day, to go outside one day. And then you build those together, and the next thing you know, you've persevered for a day, and then a week. And then you persevered for the first year, and then you've persevered for a couple of years. And you've learned some things along the way, so you become a little wiser about things. And it's not the success that you thought you were going to have. It's not the success that you wish for, but then you realize, you know, I've been successful in not being broken by this. I've been successful in surviving. So I would just encourage people to, sometimes you got to take the win. There's been a big loss, and it doesn't feel like any win will ever offset that loss, and it probably won't. But there will be some small wins that you should accept, because you're going to need them to keep going. I don't know how we got off on that topic. I think I was rambling.
I think it was a beautiful, beautiful way to end, and I so appreciate talking to you today and just really enjoyed it. I am looking forward to reading the book. So how can people get the book?
You can go to my website, askandycampbell.com. I've got a link there.
Okay.
If you're wondering why would it be named askandycampbell.com, when I was going through the cancer treatments and I didn't die immediately, people would say, I would ask my doctor, like, well, how's he still alive? And people would say, well, ask Andy. Ask Andy Campbell how he's still alive. So that became the website name. But it's askandycampbell.com. Or if you're on Amazon, probably the easiest way is just go to the website and find it there. There's a link on the website.
Okay. Sounds beautiful. AskAndyCampbell.com.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Marcy, you have all my gratitude for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation. Or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.